Hello everyone, Jai Hind and welcome to the platform of StudyIQ IAS in English. My name is Vavar Singh through MXND 115th course and qualified civil services in 2012, and I welcome you on the platform. Now when it comes to the US and the European nation or the NATO allies, there had been a rift that we had seen just right after the start of US and Iran war. And ultimately right now when it comes to the nations or the NATO nations or the European nations, there had been a trigger where the US have announced that there will be 14% of the troop reduction and there will be withdrawal of 5,000 troops from the Germany itself. Alright, now over here the German Chancellor, he had questioned the US strategy and even stated the US is being humiliated by Iran. And this highlights the deep transatlantic fractures that we are seeing between US and the NATO allies. At the same time, there had been anticipatory response and French President Emmanuel Macron, he stood before the nuclear-armed submarine Le Téméraire. Alright, this has introduced the dissociation avancée, or that is the forward deterrence, the most significant push in the 3 decades to rethink European dependence on the United States of America. And now this is again very, very important when it comes to the complete shift in the strategic position of the Europe when it comes to the United States of America. Now, there had been a nuclear national security strategy, that had been recasted upon the NATO in the transactional terms, and ultimately over here, US have said that you have to prioritize the sovereign US interest. And ultimately, because of this, there was the Hague commitment that the NATO allied they had pledged, and ultimately US have said that you will be responsible for the immediate danger, and that is the reason why these allies they pledged massive hike in the defense spending, targeting 5% of their GDP in the or by the year 2035. Now, at the same time, when it comes to Europe, we know that the Russia and Ukraine war is going on right now. And there is escalating aggression on the eastern flank that has forced the Europe to rethink about its existential dependence on the US power or the US energy. Now, there is also very important thing that there is the dual key arrangement when it comes to the stationing of the various aircrafts on the European soil by the United States. Now, when it comes to United States, so there is a complete control about the B-61 nuclear bombs which had been deployed in the peacetime across the bases which are there in Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, Italy and Turkey as well. Now, the ultimate authority about using these B-61 nuclear bombs, that is with the US itself. At the same time, the allied nations, they maintain dual capable aircraft and highly trained pilots which are ready for the crisis deployment. So this is where we have the dual key arrangement, and any weapon it cannot be delivered without the explicit simultaneous authorization from 2 nations, that is United States and the host nation. So this is the complete framework where the nuclear policy and the strategic planning, they are continuously coordinated through the NATO's nuclear planning group and underpinned by the collective defense principle of the NATO article, that is article number 5. Now, there had been a complete shift when it comes to US security guarantee. Now, when it comes to the US security guarantee, it refers to the Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty or NATO, ensuring that there will be collective defense. The shift is that ultimately when it comes to this collective defense that was unconditional, now this is shifting towards reciprocal security. And Europe is realizing that the US domestic policies, they are creating the unpredictability in the global order, and ultimately US demand for the Europe to be the primary responder of its own neighborhood is also one of the key driver force when it comes to the changing of the alignment and the shift in the policies when it comes to the complete of the Europe. Now, when it comes to the birth of NATO, so that was in 1949 when the NATO was established, and there was US nuclear umbrella that provided the stability to complete Western Europe. In 1991, after the Cold War era, the NATO expansion began and Europe, it enjoyed the peace dividend by cutting its defense power, or it has cut the defense spending because of the US umbrella that was there. In 2014, it was the wake-up call for the Europe, because the Crimea was annexed by Russia, as well as Trump had coined that there will be America first rhetoric that have triggered the strategic doubt among the European nations that is there. At the same time, in 2025, we have seen that there had been transactionalism that have formalized, and Europe have pivoted towards the strategic autonomy that it needs. So it is very important when it comes to the key drivers that we are seeing right now, that US military resources, they are shifting to counter the China's rise in Asia, as well as US domestic pressure is there to reduce the global policing cost, as well as there is growing US skepticism about the European Union as a geopolitical rival. All right, at the same time, we have seen the feud between the Europe as well, because Europe have denied supporting United States when it comes to the US and Iran war. There's divergence in digital regulation as well and defense industrial bases, and these are the key drivers that the Europe is thinking about its complete sovereignty or moving ahead, and moving towards self-actualization when it comes to the defense sector. Now, there are two tracks where the Europe is moving ahead. The first one is conventional rearmament, where the NATO baseline is that the broad European commitment is to meet or exceed the mandate of 2% of the GDP defense spending. And here there is the, you can see the end result, that is Zeitenwende, that is Germany's historic turning point, where it is unlocking 100 billion euro special defense fund for its rapid modernization. So they are moving towards the conventional rearmament, and the focus is to invest in air defense along with the long-range missiles and early warning systems as well. The second is about the nuclear consolidation, where France and UK, as well as they have upgraded the sole independent new European nuclear deterrent capabilities, and in 2025 there had been a Northwood declaration where a formal bilateral commitment was signed between London and the Paris to deepen the strategic nuclear coordination as well. Now, these initiatives, they operate entirely outside the NATO framework of the, outside the NATO framework, and even the outside the operational framework of the European Union as well. Now, when it comes to the strategic autonomy, the Europe is responding through the PESCO, that is Permanent Structured Cooperation, which is the joint military project to reduce the dependence upon the US hardware that is there. All right, the European Defence Fund, that is the EDF, it incentivizes the cross-border research and development for the interoperable systems as well. And when it comes to Zeitenwende, that is the response that the Germany has given. And this is historic turning point where massive injection of 100 billion pounds or the euro that will be there to modernize the conventional forces of Germany as well. Now, this is where we are talking about the Hague spending trajectory, where the defense outlay is, or it will be equal to 5% of the EU aggregate GDP, and that is where we are seeing that there will be more of the investment into the defense capabilities in Europe for the strategic autonomy. As well as Europe is attempting to end its strategic dependence on the US foreign military sales as well. There had been high dependence on the US for the air defense, for the missile and AI-enabled drones till now. All right, US control is there over the advanced software and in the for the modernization cycles of these defense systems as well. Now, Europe is focusing on the qualitative military edge or QME projects, which had been modeled on the Ukrainian innovations, and that is what we are going to see in the Europe in the next few years. Now, there is the geopolitical impact as well, and that is what we are talking about the eastern flank. The review, it creates a security dilemma for the Poland and the Baltic states, because ultimately the shift of the US forces had been towards the Indo-Pacific, and that leads the complete Eastern Europe vulnerable from the attacks through Russia. As well as the eastern states, they prefer the US bilateral ties over the French-led EU defense, and the need to fill the gap that is there or that had been left because of the withdrawing US presence is very important, and it is the conventional deterrence that these nations, they are moving towards strategic autonomy right now. Now, what its implication is there for India and for the global order? The first thing is that we have always moved ahead, and we have suggested and advocated multipolarity. So there is a stronger autonomous Europe that will create a third pillar in the global order, and it will support and favor India's multipolar vision that India had for the global order. This is also the opportunity for India to diversify away from the Russia and US towards European aerospace industry, that is with France and Germany. We can move ahead and we can collaborate into the new defense tech that could be there. And US is pivoting towards Asia that aligns with the India's maritime security, but ultimately that also risks a decoupled West as well. So these are the things that we have to see and the implication that this will have on the global order as well as on India. Now, what are the challenges and what could be the way forward? The first one is about the implementation gap. That is, the EU nations, they differ on the threat perception. That is, whether it is Russia or it is the migration. So they do not have a consensus when it comes to the threat perception, and that is the implementation gap when it comes to the strategic autonomy as well. There is high debt levels as well that makes 5% GDP defense spending politically difficult for the European nations right now. As well as transforming NATO into two-pillar alliance with the Europe as an equal partner, that will lead to pillarization and also rationalizing the 27 different defense budget into a single European market. That is also where the EU will have to think about, and ultimately they would have to move through this. Now, the era of the Atlas-like US security is over. The Europe, it must master its own destiny. So that is very, very important that you must understand when it comes to the shifting of the complete presence of US into the Europe, or when it comes to the the shifting of the collective umbrella that was there when it comes to the NATO. Alright, so ultimately when it comes to the peace, it is not merely the absence of war, but it is the presence of justice, of law, and even of order. So in short, it is the presence of the government that should be there, and this is a quote by Albert Einstein that aptly fits into the complete issue that we have discussed just right now. Now, if you have any questions or any suggestions, you can write down them into the comment box, and also that would be all in this video. I hope that you have a complete understanding about the shifting stance when it comes to the NATO allies and the Europe, as well as vis-a-vis US or the United States of America. Now, if you are preparing for the GS 2027, we'll be launching the new course or the new batch of GS Foundation Batch Resolution P2I. And if you are preparing for 2027, or even if you are preparing for 2028, you can enroll into the batches, and for the maximum discount, you can use BRS Live as the code and coupon for getting the maximum discount while you are purchasing any course on the platform of StudyIQ. And if you are preparing for 2027-28 and looking for a lucrative optional, you can join the public administration optional batches as well. The classes have just begun, and the batch or the admission will be closing on 31st of May. So again, you can enroll into the batch, and again, you can use the code that is BRS Live for maximum discount. Now, if you are giving your prelims this year and public administration had been your optional, and you want to brush up the concepts, brush up everything before your mains examination, so you can join the public administration crash course as well. That will start from 26th of May, just after your prelims. Alright, again, you can enter this batch by using the code that is BRS Live for the maximum discount. So that would be all in this video, in this session. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me over here on the StudyIQ IAS platform. Thank you, bye-bye, take care, but do not forget to like, share, as well as subscribe to our channel so that you do not miss any of the future major updates on our channel. Thank you, bye-bye, take care, and Jai Hind.